Darkness is not an affirmative force. It simply reoccupies the space vacated by the light.
This is the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio
and Urban Family Talk.
It should be uncomfortable for a believer to live as a hypocrite.
Delivering people out of the bondage of mainstream media
and the philosophies of this world.
God has called you and me to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment. Let's not miss our moment.
And now, the Hamilton Corner.
Good evening. Welcome to this Tuesday edition of the Hamilton Corner here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. I'm excited to be here another day. Great things are happening. It's a great time to be alive, contrary to popular belief. And if you haven't known it by now, you want to make sure you're able to use national media and don't let the national media use you. And what do I mean by that? Of course, you want to be as informed as you can, but we want to make sure that we do our best to make sure we get the proper information, but more importantly, that we don't allow the news media to dictate our emotions nor our opinions, but we take that information, funnel it through God's word, and then we say, that may be a truth there, boy, but that right there is nothing but a lie. And as we do that, we're able to we're able to protect ourselves against the roller coaster ride of emotions that the world will want to give us, where they want to tell us what to think about and tell us what to think, where we're able to turn that around. I get my information, and I say it this way. I say there's facts and there's truth. Facts is information. Truth is a person. We want to make sure that we're not only factual, but that we are truth-filled. And that is the key to being salt and light in a dark, dying, and desperate world. Where if you haven't noticed it yet, I'm pumped up. I'm back on fully loaded. Got both barrels with J Squared in the building. Well, let's get with it, right? Shall we? Deuteronomy chapter 8. This isn't anything novel, but this is just a reminder. And it kind of builds on what we were talking about yesterday. In Deuteronomy chapter 8, I'm going to read verses 11 through 14. Just 3 verses, but this is a strong reminder. Here we go. Verse 11. Take care, lest you forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments and his rules and his statutes, which I command you today. Lest when you have eaten and are full and have built good houses and live in them, and when your herds and your flocks multiply, and your silver and gold is multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied, then your heart be lifted up, and you forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. Here we have an admonition. This is Moses speaking in the book of Deuteronomy. This is his recounting to a second generation of Israelites. You have it in the original generation who came out of Egypt, walked through the Red Sea. Then you have this second generation prior to them making entree into the promised land, where Moses is recounting some things to this second generation wilderness group of Israelites, where he's saying, listen, guys, it's one thing in the previous verses in the chapter, time doesn't permit me to go through the entire chapter right now. I guess one day I have to do that. Just walk through an entire chapter of the Bible, maybe an entire book. We'll see. But in the previous verses, Moses is contrasting the Israelites in the wilderness and saying, listen, now you guys, you need to take warning. You need to be warned that it's very easy to remain faithful and dependent upon the Lord when you are in difficult circumstances. I call it being a cyclical Christian. You know how that cycle goes. Life is tough. You hit the rough patch of life. Wham! What happens? Boy, you become, an ardent prayer warrior. Oh, Lord, help me. Bless me. Thank you. Oh, Jesus. Oh, Lord, help us. And then what happens? The Lord navigates your ship out of the rocky terrain into safe, calm, smooth waters. And what begins to happen? We begin to be distracted by other pursuits. And I've said this before. Idolatry, biblically speaking, especially using the Old Testament as a model, idolatry was not the Israelites abandoning Yahweh worship completely. No. What the Israelites did is they opened up their trophy case, if you will, and simply put on the same shelf with Yahweh all of these other gods. And idolatry is not merely limited to statues and inanimate objects. It includes that, absolutely. But idolatry can also include people. It can also include certain predetermined socioeconomic statuses. It can include electoral victories. And I said this yesterday, and I'm going to reiterate this today, because I believe this very strongly, and I really feel compelled by the Lord to provide this as a warning. If we do not respond to the Lord in focusing primarily on repentance, and I said before, you know you're in political idolatry, that if you have your favorites conducting themselves in a certain way, and they do a certain thing, had your non-favorites done the same thing, you would be up in arms. Can I make it more plainly? If President Barack Obama had said certain expletives on the national stage, certain people, and I'll say it this way. I remember I was listening to Brian Fisher one day on Focal Point, and he had a caller. Focal Point is a radio program on American Family Radio. He had a caller who took offense at him because he was referring to President Trump as merely Trump. And Brian went on to say, I apologize. I didn't mean any disrespect. I just was so used to referring to him as Trump. He's been on the national scene for years before he ever ran for president. I've been so used to that, it was a matter of habit. Charge it, and this is my phrasing for it, charge it to the head, not the heart. But then Brian asked this question. And he said to the caller, he said, would you have had the same issue with me not providing due respect to the office if I referred to President Obama merely by his last name? And on the opposite end of the phone call, it was crickets. It was crickets. And I just say that, and you guys know me, I wasn't a fan of President Obama's policies, but I'm using that as an example to show what I'm talking about. Political idolatry, it's very, very subtle. And the reason why it's subtle, because we oftentimes have personal, emotional investments. We had the flip side. I said numerous times, there were lots of people who were enthralled, who purported to be believers, enthralled by President Obama because of his personality and what he represented. And I said, but what do you think about his policies? And there were people that I had conversations with that had the policies been advocated by a different personality, they would have been up in arms. And so I'm saying this to aid us and really as a warning, as I said yesterday, referring to the scriptures in Matthew, the house being swept clean, being unoccupied, the unclean spirit returns, finding the house empty, comes back 7 times worse. My suggestion is that we take great advantage of the grace that God has given us to make the first things first. Getting back to the text I'm reading today in Deuteronomy, that here the warning from Moses was, it's not as concerning, especially you second-generation wilderness Israelites. You heard the prophecies. You saw Moses come to Israel. You've witnessed what has happened to your parents. So having the full breadth of all of that information, it makes it less likely for you to abandon the Lord. I mean, you were fed by manna. You guys were walking in sandals that didn't deteriorate over these last 40 years. But the warning is, be careful when you have entered the promised land, when your tummies are full, when your herds are multiplying, when you have silver and gold in abundance. Be careful then that your hearts are not lifted up. The King James says, don't become proud. And you forget the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of slavery. Getting back to my description of that cyclical Christianity, is that the prayer warrior is on point as the difficulty mounts. But as soon as the Lord navigates your ship into safe water, safe terrain, then we begin to say, oh man, look at the fish. And oh, let's go over here. Let's do this. And the next thing that happens, and some people wonder, man, why do I have such consistent difficulty in my life? Could it be? I'm not saying it is, but could it be that the only time you seek the Lord is when your life is hard? Because see, something that we fail to realize, God is more concerned with who we are in relationship to him than what we have and than what we do. Some of us think that we demonstrate our commitment to the Lord by our performance. Listen, God is not concerned about your performance. He's concerned about who you are in your heart. When our hearts are transformed, when our hearts are committed to him. The performance is the overflow of what's in the heart. We know that from the word when it says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Out of the geyser, out of the wellspring that is in your heart, the overflow folds out through your tongue, teeth, and through your lips. The Lord's desire is for whatever ministry, whatever performance we render unto him, it is from the overflow of a heart that, for example, has been circumcised. When the Lord says, listen, don't rend your garments, rend your heart. You don't have to be concerned with whether or not you will serve appropriately when your heart is in the right place. And so I simply seek to encourage you today, and to encourage myself, quite frankly, that if things are going good, things are cool, be careful then. Two of the most vulnerable times in the life of the believer, and I say this frequently, is that after a crushing defeat and after resounding victory. Why? Because in both instances, mankind has a tendency to drop our defenses, to come away from the walls, so to speak. Sometimes after a crushing defeat, we have the tendency to get into the mully grubs. And I would tell you, just like the Bible says, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. There's therefore no condemnation to him who believes God. Sometimes we fold ourselves into self-condemnation because it is a very subtle manifestation of pride. Why? Because we think we're so dope we can keep ourselves. So if we hit a failure of some sort, we go down so deep because we thought it was up to us to keep us anyway. And then on the flip side, after a great victory, as it says later on in this chapter, in verse 17, it says, beware lest you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand has gotten me, he says, this wealth. But you could add in this victory, this comfort, this peace, this beautiful family. Look at my wife. Ooh, isn't she amazing? Oh, man, life is really going good. Be careful then. It's no surprise that the church throughout church history had the greatest strides in growth under intense persecution. And yet when the church has entree to comfort, you see an expansion in numbers and in buildings. You know, you had the great, I forgot the word, just that quick. The great edifices built under Constantine. But what happened to the core of the faith of the followers? It might look kind of like today in America. We have more people in terms of numbers professing to be believers. We have bigger buildings than ever before. But what would we say about the core of the faith? It caused me to have an adjustment in my vernacular to where I don't refer to all people who go to church as Christians. In my mind, and I think quite clearly in the Lord's mind, based on Matthew 21 and some other chapters, 24, that there's a big difference between church attenders and Christ followers. We have lots of church attenders. We don't have as many Christ followers. And so my encouragement through this particular portion today, and I was asked yesterday, what do we do with this? One of the best things you can do as believers is to be Christ followers authentically. Authentically. Often when I've had the occurrence to have certain people, they get torn away from the Christian faith because they say it's harder to find an authentic Christian, which in my estimation is an oxymoron, because you're either a Christian or you're not. But it's harder to find an authentic Christian than it is to find a hypocrite. And some people are often dissuaded because they see other people, though they're in false religions, they're in false religions in committed fashion. My suggestion would be to you to be a Christ follower. Let the aroma of Christ following exude from your pores. Let the word of God become your affection. The Lord said through the psalmist, "Oh Lord, how I love thy law. It is my meditation day and night." Please don't allow the freedom, the prosperity, the safety and security that is present in America to lull you into a false sense of security that would cause you to be blunted in your discernment, to become dulled in your capacity to be a vibrant witness for the King. But yet, in spite of the appearance of luxury, we nevertheless remain committed to the cross, that we cling to him. Say it like Apostle Paul in the book of Philippians, that we seek to apprehend that for which we have been apprehended. And I would suggest through that, we would be adequate witnesses, as Isaiah 60 says, though darkness covers the earth and gross darkness covers the people, the light has risen upon you and I.
President Trump has taken the matter of health care into his own hands. I'm Matt Staver with Freedom's Call. Congress has been uncooperative, so the president signed an executive order reforming the U.S. health care system. The courts have ruled that the subsidies propping up the system are illegal because they were created outside the budgeting process. Trump's executive order immediately stops these improper subsidies before enrollment was scheduled to begin. It now allows short-term plans to extend from 3 months to 12 months and be renewable. It allows small businesses and other groups to band together and buy health insurance for their employees and encourages competition across state lines. Obamacare increased health care costs, limited access to quality care, trampled religious freedom, and forced Americans to fund the killing of innocent children. So it's great to watch the so-called Affordable Care Act crumble away. Learn more about this and other issues at our website, lc.org.
In Bhutan, where nearly 78% of the population is Buddhist, can the gospel of Jesus Christ make inroads? Hi, I'm Don Shank, director of the Tide Global Radio Ministry, and this is today's Global Update. Bhutan is relatively closed to the gospel and is one of the least evangelized nations. But in 2012, the Tide Ministry began Christian broadcasting in Dzongkha, the official language of Bhutan. Please join us in praising God for pastors that are helping to transition curious listeners into committed believers who stand firm in their faith. A pastor who works with the Tide Partner Ministry in Bhutan recently shared this about a new believer. The listener and his wife are Buddhist, but listen to our radio program. Slowly they want to believe in the Lord and are interested in taking baptism. Please uphold them in your prayers. To find out how you can get involved in the Tide radio work and help us share the gospel in Bhutan and around the globe, visit thetide.org. That's thetide.org.
Isn't that a beautiful sound? That sonogram holds the sound of a baby's heartbeat. Hi, I'm Jim Stanley, General Manager for AFR. We're partnering with the Ministry of Preborn to help save babies' lives. Preborn partners with pregnancy centers throughout America in helping abortion-minded women choose life through ultrasound. By letting a mother hear her baby's heartbeat and see her baby in the womb, she will choose life 80% of the time. Ultrasound is a game changer. For $140, you can provide 5 ultrasounds. All gifts are tax deductible, and 100% of your gift goes to saving babies. You can save a baby's life right here in America by donating to Preborn. To donate, dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. Or donate securely at preborn.com. That's preborn.com. Your love can save a life.
American Family Radio presents In God We Trust, Hope for America. This 30-minute radio special features Dr. Robert Jeffrey, Senior Pastor of First Baptist Church in Dallas, Texas. Dr. Robert Jeffrey says God is working among His people.
There's not going to be any revival in America unless there's a revival in my heart. There's not going to be any national turning from sin unless I turn from my sin, unless I renew my commitment to God.
Listen this Thursday afternoon, 2:30 Central on American Family Radio.
Shining light into the darkness. This is the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
I'm going after the Republican establishment, and we're going to go after them. We're going to challenge. There's a coalition coming together that's going to challenge every Republican incumbent except for Ted Cruz.
Well. Welcome back to the Hamilton Corner here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. That was Steve Bannon. You know, and he made some statements about going after incumbents, and I'm going to get to that. But I wanted to share this quote that I came across from a book called Scalia Speaks that just accumulated various quotes and things from deceased Justice Antonin Scalia. And he said this, and I would just submit this to you to ponder as I have been pondering. This is the quote. He says, "I detest the term values, which suggests to me a degree of interchangeability than ought to exist, as though the principles that guide a man's life are something like monetary exchange rates, subject to change with the times." I thought that quote was rather interesting because for me, and I'm a guy, I focus on words. I'm very intentional, and quite frankly, because God is a God of language. of not ceding ground in vernacular. And his reference to principles being described as values, in his estimation, is a downgrade of what principles truly are. Principles are these things that should be constant, no matter what times change. And this, in my opinion, this clearly underscores the distinction between Justice Scalia's judicial philosophy and the philosophy of many of the regressive jurists on the bench, to where his willingness to even discuss principles as being resistant to the winds of change as provoked by time completely contrasts with the concept of legal positivism, which is the application of macroevolutionary theory to the legal structure. So I thought that was interesting, and I'm just chewing on it. I'm just throwing this out there to consider. Again, I'm going to read it again. He says, I detest the term values, which suggests to me a degree of interchangeability that ought to exist, as though the principles that guide a man's life are something like monetary exchange rates, subject to change with the times. And now, some of you are asking, how does this connect to the first clip that you played? Well, I played that clip from Steve Bannon, because he said that part of his objective with these 2018 elections, which I have said in no uncertain terms, that we've gotten to the place where many people are being exposed to the fact that swampism, labyrinth adherence is not limited to any one particular party. That you have people in all particular, especially in the two major political parties, who are a part of the swamp, a part of the labyrinth. When Dr. Walter Williams was on the program, he talked about the advancement of welfare state policies that decimate families, that they're not merely the product of Democrats. There are lots of Republicans who are just as much in love with the ever-expanding welfare state as Democrats. And I know to some of us, this is information that we're learning now. We have not thought this. This is information that we're learning now. It goes to the idea of whether or not we are people of principles. Well, I have to tell you, I am happy to report. I'm going to pull my Duck Dynasty. Happy to report that Arizona Senator Jeff Flake has announced, blow your trumpet, has announced that he is not seeking re-election in Arizona. Oh boy. Senator Flake, and his announcement, if anybody is paying attention to his race in Arizona, and I find this very interesting. I'll go through this. But Senator Flake had already drawn a primary opponent in Dr. Kelly Ward in Arizona, who was a state senator and who was known by most reports to be a person who lived by principles, as opposed to Jeff Flake. Oh, I had somebody ask me a question. They didn't understand except for Cruz's comment. Bannon was saying that he was going to wage primary challenges against every Republican incumbent in the U.S. Senate except for Senator Ted Cruz. That is what he was saying. But Dr. Kelly Ward was challenging Jeff Flake. And though Jeff Flake won his race in 2012, I pulled some stats, by a wide margin. Wait, let me get to it. Ain't call me. Jeff Flake won his Arizona race by 49% in 2012. In this go-round, Kelly Ward was beating the brakes off of him. The polls showed consistent double-digit leads, and of course, I don't trust polls completely. You know, I think recent electoral politics have shown these polls, take them with a grain of salt. But the polls showed consistently that Kelly Ward was up over Jeff Flake by double digits. And one poll I saw, she was up 26 points. 26 points. We are witnessing something, ladies and gentlemen, that is rather rare in politics, if it has ever been seen before. Because what we are witnessing, at a minimum, something that hadn't been seen consistently in recent history, we are witnessing the reality that status as an incumbent and status as the more well-funded being completely irrelevant when it comes down to the people. This, in my estimation, is great news. We saw in Alabama, Roy Moore was able to defeat Luther Strange, even though Roy Moore had only at max about $2 million. Luther Strange had $30+ million spent in that race. Luther Strange had the title as incumbent, but none of that made a difference. You have Bob Corker in Tennessee. These are Republicans in Tennessee who had the status as a long-time incumbent, who had all the money in the world and the support of the establishmentarians in Washington, D.C., yet he announced he is not running for re-election. And by the way, he's in a pretty intense Twitter feud with the president, which, you know, I'll tell you guys candidly, I think Twitter and social media as a whole could be a great tool for presidents to use. I think it could be the modern iteration of the fireside chat, where you're able to bypass all of the mainstream talking snake media and talk directly to your public. I mean, President Trump has hundreds of millions of people that follow him on all of his social media outlets. I got to tell you, having a Twitter feud with a senator, I just don't dig it. I just don't dig it. Today, even though some things President Trump says I find funny, like this that I'm about to share. He said, Bob Corker, who couldn't get elected dog catcher in Tennessee if he wants, yet he wants to fight me on tax cuts. I thought that was pretty funny. Bob Corker, he probably couldn't get elected dog catcher right now. That was pretty funny. But there's a lot of other stuff that the president says. I'm like, come on. Did you need that one? I don't think so. But this all set me up to look. And I want to share some things because, you know, Jeff Flake saying that he's withdrawing from the race, you know, it sounds like, well, yeah, you know, he realizes the writing's on the wall. Well, you know, really, Senator Flake, if you really want to do America a solid, if you really want to, why don't you just resign now? Why not? Why hold this out and continue rolling this on until 2018 if you realize that your time is up? Just resign now. Bob Corker, the same thing. Do the United States a favor and the state that you claim to care about, Tennessee and Arizona respectively, resign. Why not? I'll tell you why. Because for some people, fighting the president is more important than doing what's best for the country. That's my opinion. Shortly after news broke that Senator Flake was retiring, he took to the Senate floor to explain his decision, and he went on a Trump-bashing bonanza from the Senate floor. And this is, and I want to give you an example of how the labyrinth works. Just an example. After Jeff Flake gives his speech on the Senate floor, you have Senator John McCain, who is the other senator from Arizona, who says this: "It was one of my great honors in life to serve alongside Jeff Flake, a man of integrity, honor, and decency, and commitment to not only Arizona, but the United States of America." Now, let me show you how this stuff works. Because I'm going to tell you, I think John McCain, Senator McCain, set Jeff Flake up for the okie doke. I'm going to tell you how. John McCain was just reelected to another 6-year term in the Senate in November 2016. He was on the exact same ballot with President Donald Trump. Do you think John McCain, what kind of campaign do you think John McCain ran in 2016 and 2015? Man, John McCain sounded like he was auditioning to be a member of President Trump's cabinet. Repeal Obamacare, tax cut, I mean everything. Right down the line, Republican Party platform. And I can tell you that as he's doing that, he invites Senator Flake to say, yeah, man, let's just pile on Trump. Let's just go at Trump. You know, I mean, he's terrible for America. Let's just go at Trump. Yet John McCain secured his seat. He didn't say any of that while he's running. Yet, the way they used to say it back on the block where I'm from, he bucks up Jeff Flake. They say, man, get him, Jeff. Get him, Jeff. And Jeff Flake goes in, yeah. Rah, 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 rah. And the next thing you know, not running for re-election because Jeff Flake is up for election in 2018. That's how it works. That's how it works. Senator McCain gets Jeff Flake to take the bait. And now Senator McCain says, it was one of my highest honors to serve with Jeff Flake as he's on his way out the door. That's terrible. Terrible for him. Well, this is getting rather interesting because 2018 initially was thought to be a banner time for Republicans because there are 34 seats up in the Senate for re-election. 23 of them are for Democrats. 2 are for independents who caucus with the Democrats in the Senate, and 9 were of Republicans. And of those 9 seats, you have 5 in states that President Trump won overwhelmingly. Those states being Indiana, Missouri, Montana, North Dakota, and West Virginia, all of which are currently held by Democrats. These Democrats are very nervous. Those senators are very nervous. And then you have 5 more states that are currently held by Democrat senators, but these states were won by President Trump in slighter margins. Those states being Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Then, I'm going to call this right now. Some of you are going to say I'm crazy. But I think the state of Virginia, the U.S. Senate seat in the state of Virginia that's up for re-election may, I'm not saying it is yet, may very well be in play. I'm just going to say that and leave that out there for you guys to consider for yourself. I know some people think that I'm crazy, but I'm just telling you, watch it. Just watch it. So you have these states originally thought to be, whoa, this is going to be big time for the Republicans in 2018. Then it flipped because President Trump was staggering out of the gates with his presidency. People saying that, looks like the Democrats are gonna be the ones they're gonna be to make some headway. And now it's looking different. Not only are the seats currently held by Democrats in play, but now because of the manifestation of the depths of the swamp, the American people are coming to realize we need to get these Republican incumbents out. So you have 2 out of the 9 Republican incumbents, they're not even fighting. Think about this. They didn't lose in a primary. 2 of them quit. They just quit because they realize the American people are on to them. And they cannot continue that charade. So this folds in. Once again, I think this is good. But again, we should not kick up our heels and act as if, we're in the promised land. My herds are reproducing. We got gold. We got silver. No, ladies and gentlemen. We must press in all the more. And as I said yesterday, our goal cannot merely be political victory. It must be pursuits of righteousness. Well, I have some more information. This is just funny. And I think I'm just going to play the audio before we get to the break. Do we have time? How much time do we have, Jason? We don't have time. I have to do it when we come back. Well, let me do this. I'm going to give out the number because we are going to open the phone lines in the next segment, but I have to get to this. Trust me, you're going to want to hear this. The call-in number is 888-589-8840. That number again is 888-589-8840. Anything that we've discussed during today's program is fair game. And I want to set up this audio I'm going to share on the way back. What do you think happens when MSNBC takes its cameras down to the Mexican border to investigate the prototypes for President Trump's wall? President Trump has received funding for 8 prototypes, the different potential walls that would be used should they get funding and they build the wall on the southern border. What do you think happens when MSNBC bring their cameras down there? You do not want to miss this audio. I wish I could show the video because the video just really shows it. But you can't make this stuff up. You cannot make this stuff up. I may be going out on a limb here, but I think I'm pretty safe in saying that MSNBC probably weren't supporters of a border wall. Question I have now is, are they supporters now? Kind of like the Verizon guy. Can you hear me now? Do we need to protect the border or not to protect the border? More when we get back on the Hamilton Corner on the other side of this break.
Hi, this is Ron Ball, and this is your Choose Greatness Minute. A number of years ago, my wife Amy and I were in a car accident in Atlanta, Georgia. Our local pastor recommended a friend of his who was the chief legal counsel of a giant Atlanta corporation. This tough, intimidating lawyer told us he had no time for a case as small as ours. As I turned to go, he said, "What brought you to Atlanta?" I said, "We just graduated from Asbury College in Kentucky, and we're new in the community." Suddenly he softened, and he said, "My mother went to Asbury College. I will help you. She prayed for me every day." This tough attorney had never forgotten the godly prayers of a godly mother. Your prayers as a godly mother are still having effect right now. Pray for your children. Pray for your husband. Pray for your country. A godly woman's prayers are powerful. Learn more at ChooseGreatness.com, ChooseGreatness.com.
Hi, Carl Kirby here with Reasons for Hope, and today we're talking about butterfly wings. Once this cunningly crafted creature emerges from the chrysalis, it completes the building of its wings by pumping them full of fluid from its stomach. Have you ever touched a butterfly's wings and then noticed there was dust on your fingers? Well, that's not dust. Those are actually scales. Butterfly wings are made up of thousands of scales that are arranged like the tiles on a roof, but they're much more complex. The scales themselves aren't always colored like the feathers of a bird. Instead, they're in multiple layers and separated by air, causing light to be refracted and creating an optical effect so that we see very intense colors. That's why they seem to change colors when we look at them from different angles. Fact is, with 20,000 different patterns, these aerodynamically efficient solar panels of perfection point toward a perfect designer. Hey, Blind Chance, try explaining that one. For more information, check us out at rforh.com. Stay bold.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starnes with news and commentary next. The war on Christmas has already started in Granville, Ohio. The Chamber of Commerce took the word Christmas out of the annual Christmas Candlelight Walking Tour. There was so much backlash, the Chamber backtracked slightly. Now they're going to let business owners vote on the name change. Big celebration in Lewiston, Maine. Irene Schwinnard turns 103. 6 generations of her family turned out for the party, including 49 great-grandchildren, 38 great-great-grandkids, and 1 great-great-great-grandson. Former President Jimmy Carter says National Football League players have a right to protest, but not during the game, telling the New York Times players should stand for the national anthem. He also said the mainstream media has been tougher on Donald Trump than any president in history. Jimmy Carter said that. A Democrat. I'm Todd Starnes.
The Hamilton Corner podcast and one-minute commentaries are available at afr.net and urbanfamilytalk.com. Back to the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the Hamilton Corner. As promised, we will take phone calls this segment. The number to call is 888-589-8840. Once again, that number is 888-589-8840. Well, as promised, I want to share this audio with you because it is absolutely hilarious. Where you have MSNBC reporter Jacob Soboroff interviewing Border Patrol agent Roy Villarreal. Yes, that's Roy Villarreal on the southern border in Tijuana, Mexico, where he was checking out the 8 prototypes for President Trump's wall. And guess what he happened to see? If you would, Jay Charles, please play clip number 1.
Currently, we have just under 700 miles of fencing along the border. We don't have any intentions of fencing off the entire southwest border. It's not necessary.
So what happens now? Does the president come out here and literally say, okay, I like that one?
We're going to test it for breachability, for the subterranean aspect. Can we dig under it? Can we cut through it? Can we scale over it?
What happened? The people are crossing. Almost on cue, a group of asylum seekers, migrants not from Mexico, jumped over the existing fence to turn themselves in to border agents on horseback. It's like a small group of 3 people just jumped over in the middle of the day. Girl there with a pink backpack. Can you explain to me what's going on?
This is a reality of everyday border enforcement. Well, the United States is still the draw, the ultimate draw for people that have dire situations where they're at. We're going to continue to witness this. It plays out on a regular basis for us.
And it did just here, just now.
Just now, yeah.
Now this, you can't make this stuff up. You cannot make this stuff up again. I might be wrong, but I don't think MSNBC favors the border wall. And the facts are that illegal border crossings are at the lowest they've been in recent history. I mean, the precipitous drop is amazing. It's amazing what happens when the dialogue concerning it changes. But as they are recording in the middle of the interview, and I'm hearing some things now that MSNBC has taken this video down now, which I find very telling, because at first I was going to say I was a little, it was interesting to see that MSNBC didn't take it down immediately. But now I'm hearing, I haven't seen it myself yet, since I've been on the program, since before the program to being on the program, some are saying that they've taken the video down. But in the middle of the interview, this is on video. You see 3 people crossing over the current dilapidated border fence that is so small, the reporter himself walks over to the fence, steps on the rock, and stands up next to the little fence. He said, man, yeah, we probably do need to do something. I mean, because a picture is worth 1,000 words. And the Border Patrol agent, Mr. Villarreal, was explaining that every day people are crossing right at this point. So I just thought that was amazing. And if you would notice during the audio, you heard the reporter refer to them as asylum seekers, migrants not from Mexico. Isn't that interesting? I bring that up because of this next story that I have in my hands. Interestingly, and I'll get to the phone lines after this, FBI officials stopped a South American foreign national who was inspired by ISIS from blowing up a shopping mall in Miami, Florida. Authorities arrested 53-year-old Vicente Adolfo Solano, a citizen of Honduras residing in Miami. They arrested him for attempting to use a weapon of mass destruction in a planned attack at a shopping mall in Miami. The FBI used a confidential informant, and through this confidential informant, they were able to determine Solano's intentions, and it helped the authorities to collect the evidence they needed to make the arrest. To prove that he was serious about wanting to bomb a crowded Miami mall, Solano provided multiple videos to the confidential informant in which he made pro-ISIS statements and expressed anti-United States sentiments. Undercover FBI agents then sold Solano a fake bomb, which he attempted to arm as he walked into the Miami mall. This is not hyperbole nor a hypothetical scenario. The FBI sold this guy a fake bomb. He walks into the mall and attempts to arm the bomb, and at that point, the FBI arrested him. In one of the videos Solano made, he cited his hatred for the United States as one of the main reasons he wanted to carry out a terrorist attack, where he said, I am here because I like the way that ISIS confronts the United States and the countries of the coalition, meaning the coalition fighting ISIS. Getting back to the quote, they're strong. It's a group that is growing in social media. I love that there is going to be a holy war. The United States is the most terrorist country of them all. It invades when it wants to and when it's convenient for them. That is why I am joining the Islamic group, the holy war, in the name of, he names the God of Islam, and he says, our leader, Abu, end quote. But this guy was arrested. And so I read these stories in tandem because we cannot deny reality. I said before, we have no excuse not to have compassion. But compassion should not move us to embrace policies that are detrimental to the nation. We should never allow our compassion to remove us. As MSNBC is interviewing the Border Patrol agent, Mr. Villarreal, 3 people who are identified as non-Mexican asylum seekers. This gentleman came to the U.S. not from Mexico, but from Honduras. Whether or not he came through the southern border, I can't tell you that. He went to Miami. I don't know. I don't know that. But what I can tell you is that we cannot put our heads in the sand concerning the threats that have been verbalized and those that have been acted upon. Those that have been acted upon. And those like this case that have been that were attempted to be acted upon. Well, as promised, we'll go to the phone lines. And if you want to be a part of the program, the phone number to call, once again, is 888-589-8840. Again, if you want to call, the number is 888-589-8840. We will first go to Parker Heights, Texas, where Marty is on the line. Marty, thank you for calling the Hamilton Corner.
Brother Abe, God bless you for your show, and God bless Christian radio. Hey, I'm a retired federal worker, 34 years, and all these political things, public office, all the mess, the border, all the things that are facing this government, it brings to mind, I have a sign hanging here in my shop. It's Colossians 3:23. It says, "And whatever you do, do it heartily, as to the Lord and not to men." And if some politicians would hear that verse and live it and believe it, that what they're doing is all building their own little empires and protecting themselves, and they forget that they work for the American people.
You're absolutely right, Marty. I agree with you 100%. But I will say this. I think a part of it has been the result of what I would suggest is the impact of faux Christianity boiling over into the political coffers. Because when we have people who can simply just say, "Hey, I'm agree with you guys. I'm with you," but there's really no investigation into the fruit. We get people who profess to adhere to biblical values, but when they get into Washington, D.C., they reveal who they truly were all along. Again, principles are principles. They're unmoving. They're unwavering. This is who we are. This is what we believe. They don't adjust because of the times. But when you have malleable positions, that's because that's a position. That's not a principle for you. And this is why I've said before that strongly everybody should reconsider whether or not we want to be those who support incumbents. We've made a lot of points. We've had lots of conversations here about the filibuster. How can we say we want to advance, an America First agenda to get back to constitutional principles, while at the same time saying we support the extra constitutional filibuster? It's just insane to me. And it was 30 Republican senators joined with 30 some odd Democrat senators, even though they can't agree on anything, generally speaking. But one thing they can agree on, the filibuster. Back to the phone lines. We'll go next to John, who's driving a truck in Mississippi. John, welcome to the Hamilton Corner. Go right ahead.
Yes, sir. I am a strong Christian person myself. Don't get me wrong. I haven't always lived like I should, but you got to remember that there was only one perfect one ever. And I'm very, very disappointed in our government, Republicans and Democrats combined. But I'm disappointed in the Republicans, especially, that will not support our president, because I think he's been doing a great job. He's dropped the ball a couple of times. Don't get me wrong. I don't agree completely with some of the stuff he says, but he's been the toughest president since Mr. Reagan.
Thank you so much for your call, John. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join the program. And I think when we're discussing politics, I think that's what you can expect, to not agree with everything a person says. But the question that should be asked is, what direction is the country moving in? What direction are we moving in as a country? And then if you want to join the program, there's still room. There are a few call lines open. The number to call is 888-589-8840. That number again is 888-589-8840. But we'll go back to the phone lines right now, where we have Alan on the line calling from North Carolina. Alan, welcome to the Hamilton Corner.
Thank you. It's so good to talk with you. And actually, I met you shortly after the New Year, whenever I'd travel there to the American Family Association headquarters there, and had the pleasure of meeting you. I wanted to see you in person, and just had wanted to thank you so much for everything that you do and that the American Family Association does. But what I'd really wanted to weigh in is the same question that same issue you've been discussing about the border fence. Mm-hmm. And I grew up in Texas, and early on I learned about the situation with illegal Mexicans who were there, and then since then, of course, I still have a loyalty to Texas, and of course, since I'm retired Army, to the United States and our need to secure the southern border. But in talking with some of my friends and some of the folks that I know there, I hear all kinds of things happening of people coming across the border and, just trashing out the ranches, and, a couple of cases that they found these prayer rugs, Muslim prayer rugs there that had been discarded. because when they're crossing the border, then I think they underestimated how difficult it would be. But I just really hope that President Trump does everything he can to build that border wall. I really think it's necessary.
Thank you very much, Alan, for your call. Yeah, on the program, one time I shared some audio and a story of an older woman who lives right there on the border, and she would routinely wake up to find people in her home. People attempting to cross the border, they would be aware of Border Patrol coming around, and they would try those crossing the border illegally sought refuge in this woman's home. And I thought this is an amazing picture, because here this woman, she would leave water and things for people crossing the border illegally, but at the same time, she supported strong border security. So it was an interesting dichotomy, but you described it. There are many people who live on the border, and they just on a regular basis, on the southern border, on a regular basis, have people crossing in and out of their property on a regular basis. Well, I want to just share this, because this is something that's not being discussed very much in the news media. And I've been holding on to this story for quite some time. But last week, you might not have been aware of it, because, of course, the talking snake media won't report it, but China's president, Xi Jinping, hosted or was speaking at a national congress in China, where he spoke for 3.5 hours, laying out his 30-year plan for China to become the preeminent superpower in the world, surpassing the United States of America. A 3.5-hour speech, Mr. Xi Jinping urged the reinvigorated Communist Party to take a stronger role in society and in economic development to allow the nation to rise to its fullest potential and becoming the preeminent superpower in the world. So I just wanted to let you know, just taking a peek, around the world, that while we're facing what we're facing here, there are people around the world saying that, hey, this is a great opportunity to take advantage of the United States of America to surpass them. China said, President Xi Jinping basically laid out his case that he's aware that they are a regional superpower, but he said the region is not enough for him, that they want to become the major player on the world stage. So I just wanted to give you that bit of information. I have a lot of stories that I'd never get to, but I wanted to make sure I shared that before the end of the program. Back to the phone lines. We'll go next to Houston, Texas, where Peter is on the line. Peter, thank you for calling the Hamilton Corner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hamilton. And just to follow up on that point, so looks like we're going to be going to a 24-hour nuclear watch, as far as I've heard. We're calling up 1,000 active pilots to run another 24-hour watch. We'll have bombers, B-52 bombers on standby, as far as I understand, with nuclear warheads at some strategic locations. So just to add on to that point, it looks like we're going to be in a Cold War with China and, of course, North Korea.
Are you in the military, Peter? Are you in the military?
Not in the military, but I'm up on the thread, the Twitter thread. I follow a pilot, and that was one of his threads that I read the whole story. It's it's Department of Defense stuff. So it looks like that $800 billion loan. That looks like it's what it's going for. It's great.
Got to jump in there, Peter. Thank you so much for your calls, your comments. I know there's some people on the line holding. I'm sorry, I won't be able to get to you, but I want to end the program the way I started it. We want to make sure that we don't allow ourselves to be lulled into a false sense of security, because when our tummies are full, when our coffers are full, and our crops and our herds are multiplying, there lies a temptation to rest on our laurels. We must remain sober and vigilant.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.